Hi, health psychology students. You might remember that at the beginning of the term we examined two different models of health and illness, the biomedical model and the biopsychosocial model, and we've looked at these models throughout the term. I'd like to take a moment to review these two models and talk about how you'll use them in your final assignment. The biomedical model is the traditional model that's been used in medicine for years, and this model includes biological factors, those biological systems of organs, tissues, and cells. It also includes psychological systems and social systems, but this model conceptualizes them as separate variables, and often this leads to an overemphasis on biological factors. Health psychologists promote the biopsychosocial model of health and illness as an alternative to the traditional biomedical model. In the biopsychosocial model, we see the person as including those biological systems of organs, tissues, and cells, and also the psychological systems, those behaviors and mental processes, cognitions or thoughts, emotions, or we've used the term affect throughout the term, and motivation. We also recognize that the person is embedded in an environment, and a social environment more specifically, including family members and peers, their community, and society. So why do we propose that the biopsychosocial model is superior to the biomedical model? Well, it's because there's ample evidence that integrating biological, psychological, and social factors in the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of illness, and also the promotion of health, produces better outcomes, and it supports optimal health. Let's take a look at how we've seen some of these things throughout the course, and this won't be an exhaustive list, but just something to think about as you move into your final assignment. Biological systems and components are important, of course. We've looked at a lot of biological factors this term. In fact, this health psychology course is an interconnected course in the plan of essential education. It's interconnected with biology. We've encountered biological factors just all throughout the term, including physiological responses to stress. So if you think about the sympathetic nervous system activation with the release of the catecholamines, and the catecholamines like epinephrine influence cardiovascular function, influence blood glucose, many other factors. We've looked at the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis, which regulates the release of the stress hormone cortisol. And cortisol has effects on cardiovascular function and immune function. And chronic activation of these systems can lead to problems with immune function and other kinds of health problems. We've also looked at physiological processes of the brain. For example, how nicotine affects neurotransmitter function, or how meditation influences brain activity. And then, of course, the role of nociceptors and also different brain structures in pain perception. So we've looked at a lot of biological components. Now, being a health psychology class, it's not surprising that we've also investigated a lot of psychological factors. We've looked at cognition, different thoughts, like beliefs about the severity of outcomes, beliefs about risk. In general, those common sense representations of illness, those illness schemas. Things like how people think about their level of control over their health, their locus of control, and even things like how message framing influences people's perception of risk. We've seen that emotions have a big impact on health-related behavior and on health, whether that's encountering dramatic relief, that kind of wake-up call that initiates a change in behavior, or the effects of fear and fear appeals on behavior change, or the role of negative affect and neuroticism on health, or how hostility influences cardiovascular function. We've looked at different aspects of motivation, both just general health-related values, but also how motivation is reflected in those stages of readiness to change that we saw in the trans-theoretical model, and behavioral intentions like we saw with the theory of planned behavior. And motivation is often reflected in behavior. And all of these factors influence the individual's behavior, whether that's smoking, dietary behaviors, their utilization of health services, health screening behaviors, how they seek information or avoid information, their adherence to medication or to treatment plans, and even pain behaviors like grimacing or moaning. In this class, we've also looked at the environment that the person is embedded in, the social environment, and mostly in health psychology, we look at more proximal factors, or those that are close to the individual. So norms that are established by people who are important to the person, like their family or friends. We looked at a lot of factors related to social support and helping relationships. And that issue of secondary gains that can occur in response to pain or illness behavior, how other people might remove responsibilities or give sympathy in response to pain behaviors or illness behaviors. We've looked at things like the lay referral network and how the schemas that your friends and family hold about illnesses can influence whether your friends or family urge you to seek medical care or not. We've looked at other kinds of social interactions like the patient-provider communication behaviors and then patient-provider relationship, and how the effects of stereotypes and stigma, prejudice, and discrimination can affect health, whether that's gender-related stress for gender-diverse individuals or health professionals' implicit biases about race or weight, or health professionals' incorrect knowledge that they learned through their training, through medical school, about things like race or weight or other factors, and how those can reduce the quality of care a patient receives. Now, in health psychology, because psychology is the study of an individual's thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, health psychologists have been less attentive to these broader societal factors, the societal structures that influence health. We understand that the long-standing discrimination based on race, as reflected in the article on the Tuskegee experiments, and how lack of access to health care, those are things that influence health. This week's assigned material regarding social determinants of health and also Kamara Jones's analogies address those societal factors. But most importantly, health psychologists emphasize that these things don't exist separately. Biological systems, psychological systems, and social systems all interact. They influence each other. And they can combine to result in harmful health outcomes, or they can combine to help move the individual closer to optimal health. So for your final assignment, you'll be creating a case study that demonstrates how these factors work together. And you'll employ specific concepts you've encountered throughout the course. I've just mentioned some examples of them as a way for you to get started thinking about them. But you'll take those specific concepts and use them to demonstrate how these biological, psychological, and social factors interact to influence health behaviors and health outcomes, to either produce worse health outcomes or produce more optimal health outcomes.